I think a lot of you were here for the Hershey's presentation. I saw some change up in the middle. But for those who were here for the Hershey's presentation, I saw something really cool. When the mind maps came up, how many people saw those mind maps? It was a lot of you, right? Okay. I was standing at the back of the room, and I saw probably I'd say about 30 or 40% of you all picked up your phone and started taking pictures of that mind map. Why? Because ultimately, it was really cool, right? It was a visualization, it was an image of what the gentleman who was talking, I'm sorry that his name has escaped. He's laughing at me in the front here, but it was a visualization of what he was trying to tell you, what he was trying to explain. Now, everything that we saw in the Hershey's presentations, and for those who weren't here, you missed out on some fabulous presentations, but you'll still have a lot from this to gain. We saw something about mind mapping and about using the mind mapping to understand what customers are thinking about your product. And then we saw something about measuring emotion and people's interpretation of your ads through ad testing with video and facial recognition. Really cool stuff. But at the heart, what is it that they just gathered? What they were gathering through either watching somebody's interpretation of the videos or mind mapping ultimately is data, right? And it's really high tech, it's really cool, but it still boils down to the same kind of data, or at least a new advanced way of collecting data like we always have. Whether you're doing it via surveys or whether you're pulling it in from these more advanced methodologies, no matter what, it's data. And it's just adding more and more and more data. Right now, I think this stat, and my citations down there are kind of small, but I think this data came from IBM, and their stats of late say that it's 2.5 quintillion bytes of data being produced every single day. And that's data that you as corporate brands or you as market researchers who are helping corporate brands have to figure out somehow what to do with. You have to do something with it, right? And it's a lot of information. All of this stuff that's coming in, so whether it's your mind mapping, whether it's the facial recognition, whatever it is, just because the data exists doesn't mean it's doing anything for you, right? You have to do something with it. Now, from the market research perspective, this is overwhelming. Okay, you've got market researchers pulling their hair out saying, dear God, I'm getting more data than I've ever seen before in my life. They're putting ridiculous amounts of time in trying to reorganize that data, make sense of that data, and ultimately, if I go back one, you'll see that one of the biggest challenges is that decision makers, the bosses at the corporations, whether you're corporate research or whether you're a research agency working with corporations, the decision makers in those corporations don't know what to do with the data unless you're presenting it the right way. So that's the key piece here, is presenting the information the right way. And again, I'll go back to the fact that it doesn't matter where you're getting the data from. It can be your research findings, it can be sensors and stuff you have, tracking data that you might be using, GPS data, emotional recognition, mind mapping. It doesn't matter where, it's all data. And when you're presenting that, before you can actually do anything with that data, it needs to be understandable. It needs to be something easily interpreted. And to do that is where we come in with visualization. Visualization is a pretty important thing. Oop, I jumped ahead too fast. Visualization is a pretty important thing. But in order to do that, you need to pull all the data together. Now I can have this one. And all that data coming from a million different places needs to somehow be mixed together, mapped together, and then ultimately be able to spit out, not just to the decision makers, not just to the CEO of corporations, not just to the highest people in the company, but to the people that can make the changes. So just a minute ago, Andy was talking about having a sit down with the people, the marketing people, and the different constituents throughout the organization who are going to be able to make changes to their advertisements, who are going to be able to make changes to the positioning and create the brand as it needs to be created in the minds of the consumers. Each one of those people, each one of those different constituents within the organization needs to be able to see data in a way that makes sense to them. And if you think about it, a CEO is not looking at the same data as a marketing person is. We have very different needs, very different interpretations based on what we do, what we understand, our position in the company. So it's really important to be able to pull that data together, but then also spit it back out in a way that actually makes sense. Visualization is a great way to do this because it does help to make it understandable. So going back to that beginning, like I said, there had to have been like 60% of you or better. It was a lot of people who were taking pictures of the screen when that picture popped up, because that picture meant something to you. It created a mental model. It created an image in your mind. It helped to clarify what was being said because it was visual. And visualization is huge. Ultimately, Aberdeen put out this stat a bit ago saying that people who are using visual data are 28% more likely to understand and find timely information than those who are not. They have a better understanding of the data because it's clearer, just like why you were taking the pictures before, why it meant so much to get your phone out so quickly and take those pictures. And I heard a couple of people at the end when they were trying to snap their pictures go, oh, when the screen changed, because they didn't get it just in time. And that's the key thing. That picture meant the world to you because it helped to pull everything together. That picture is clear, it's understandable, it's actionable. It's going to drive you forward and help you to do what you need to do, whether it's bring the learnings to your organization, change your brand, whatever the case may be. So let's take a couple of quick peeks, and we're going to kind of walk through a bit of a story here and then jump into some best practices. Now, two things. First off, before I knew that I was going to be part of this Hershey's group that was going to be talking so much about the qualitative side, I pulled a whole bunch of quantitative pictures. So sorry about that in advance, but use your imagination and we can talk through some qualitative stuff as well. The point of this is that visualizations don't just stop. I've mentioned the CEOs, I'd mentioned putting it out to your marketing team, but it doesn't stop there. It's for you too. If you're collecting data in any way, shape, or form, visualizations, as simplistic as something that you see here on the screen right now, can help to bring your data to life. A lot easier than numbers alone. So it starts in your own organization and spreads out. It can get even more exciting than that. That was a pretty boring picture, right? That was boring. And it gets really cool here. This one starts to get, it's a map of the world, and it's color-coded and telling us what's happening in the different regions of the world. This image I particularly love because what this one does is this is driving me to do something. If I'm looking at this image, whatever my role in marketing or whatever the case is, I would look at an image like this. And the first thing I want to do is I want to know, why is the United States so low? What is different from the United States versus Asia, which is doing so much better? And that's the beauty of visualization, that there's not a single word on here, all right, except for the word United States, just ignore that. But there's no words. Ultimately, it's the picture alone that is driving me to want to do something, and action is the key component in anything that we do. And it does start to move into the qualitative, and this is about, the qualitative. This is about as qualitative as I went with my screenshots, again, not knowing I was going to be in this group. It can be done with text. Things that people are saying, whether it's text that's been translated into, or spoken word that's been translated into text, or whether you're actually doing open-ended surveys or something like that, the same thing can be done. Quick and easy ways to glance at the information and ultimately understand what's being said or how people feel about your brand with just one look. This can all be pulled together in the end. Now, I gave you a few little simplistic explanations here, but the end result is to produce something that, again, is going to be specific to the individuals who need it. So whether it's your marketing team, whether it's your CEO, because again, data by itself does nothing. You still need to involve the people who are going to say, yes, do it, or who are going to drive the next action forward. That needs to be communicated to them. All of your findings and whatever research you're doing has to be communicated. One of the ways this can be done, obviously a lot of people are still using PowerPoint, but one other way to do it are using dashboards or infographics. Dashboards are really just an electronic infographic for all intent and purpose. And you can put those together, little widgets that put together a full story of what's happening in the organization. One cool thing that some organizations have done, and this is actually a Confirm It customer who had done this, and they took the infographic and broke it out into multiple tabs and created a portal that all of their employees could log into and understand the entire story from what's happening between it was a television station, between their television station and their direct competitors. On the next tab, it talks about who's viewing what. Go beyond that, it's their brand awareness. They've got data about that. The next is actual talk, the words that are being spoken by their customers and their viewers on social media was all being pulled in. And the last tab, then, the insights. So this is a beautiful way where they've broken out out that story into multiple tabs. So a million different ways to break the story out, but to ultimately visualize the data in such a way as it's quick, easy, at a glance, so it can be understood, absorbed, and acted on very quickly. One of the key pieces of visualization is not just looking at the data, however. Sometimes you want to play with it a little bit. You know, when I looked at that map of the United States, the first thing I said was, I wanted to know what was going on in the US. How fabulous is it that I could just click on that and go learn deeper detail? And that's one of the things that some of these systems can do as well. Yes, total shameless plug for Confirm It, we can, but many others can as well. And you can go into that data and click on the piece that interests you most, and it takes you to a deeper dive so you can understand more and continues to push you deeper and deeper through the story that your data is trying to tell. And ultimately, I don't think anybody can disagree that the end result in anything that you're doing, any data you're collecting, whether it's your mind mapping, your facial recognition on the videos, all of that is for a purpose, right? Ultimately, with the videos, it's to create better videos. Everything you're doing is with the intention of driving some action. We want to see the company do something to improve. If there's no action, you just wasted all your time, right? Well, ultimately, a nice thing to do in that too is to watch the outcome of that action. When we do anything, this one happens to be how people were followed up after being dissatisfied or unhappy. But if you were putting out the ads, for example, and looking at what people are doing, and then you make a change to your advertisements based on the feedback that you've gotten, you want to see, is it working? So then the reporting and the visualizations don't stop at just what we're doing before, but continue after to make sure and monitor that the changes you've made or the actions you've taken have actually done something of value for your company. So getting down to our last 3 minutes, we're going to speed through some best practices around visualization. First thing, it's a story. Anytime you're creating a visualization, you are telling a story. A story has an absolute flow. If you think about Cinderella, everybody knows the story of Cinderella. What would happen if I told you, forget everything you know, and let's just jump to the end. Let's just jump to the insight, right? The insight is Cinderella got married and lived happily ever after. How excited are you? There has to be a story, there has to be a buildup, there needs to be context. The story of Cinderella is no good if we don't understand that her life really sucked, that she had all these problems and she was treated really poorly. That's how your data is. That's how you're creating a visualization. If you're building an infographic, putting it into a PowerPoint, it must be a story. You've got to have some background information, some context. What are we trying to do? Why are we trying to do it? What's going on in the universe around? What's going on in the market? What are our competing brands? Ultimately, something that's going to build out that bigger story before we get to the insight, so people will go, oh, really? Wow, I totally see it. The next piece is, obviously, you've got all this contextual data. We've brought all this stuff in. We've talked about all the data we're going to put together in order to create that story. How are you going to get people to see the right things? The truth is, you got to provide a guided tour. And this is something in graphic design that is done very commonly. You'll see things, the really important stuff kind of pulled out, like my umbrella here. You know, you've got a bright umbrella among all the black umbrella. That context, that black umbrella context is really important to the story. You understand from this that this is a picture of all different umbrellas, but you know what the most important umbrella is. You understand that the most important piece of information on this slide is that bright umbrella. And that's exactly how your infographic is. We want to be sure that the most important ideas are pulled out and clear. It can be bolding, italic, bigger print, whatever the case may be, but something to pull it out. I specifically chose today really simple graphics because I wanted to point out that it doesn't have to be rocket science. You don't have to try to create the fanciest designs in the world. Sometimes a pie graph works. Depending on your clients, depending on the people in your organization, they may need something as simple as a bar chart, and that's fine. Simplicity is not a bad thing. Spice it up if you want. Add some branding, that's fabulous, but don't go overboard and lose your message. Next, and I kind of was pretty clear about this from the beginning, everything you're doing in design is for a purpose. You're trying to provide the information that somebody needs in order to do something. If that data isn't resulting in some sort of tangible actions that are ultimately also being measured, then you've done nothing. You have to be designing to drive action. So everything you're doing is leading up to what is that insight, what is that important piece of information that's ultimately going to be the game changer in the organization. And I'm like 2 seconds over, but I'm going to steal this anyway. This is a customer of ours that has done some pretty cool stuff over time with our dashboards and stuff. And I just thought this was a great example of how it can play out in a market research world. This customer, their name is Crosstab. They work with market research, worldwide, really complex, big programs, lots of customers, a lot of long-term, like tracking things, brand tracking studies, and so on and so forth. And what they've done is they've created portals. I showed you a portal before where we had the multi-tabs, and they've created these portals where they let their clients log in to grab their own reports. They have scrapped PowerPoint. They're done with it. They want nothing to do with PowerPoint anymore. Everybody logs in and grabs their visualizations, and they've created these portals to look like infographics. So you've got these gorgeous infographics with fabulous visualizations that follow a perfect story. It's all real-time data. So their clients are like, wow, look at what I'm getting. It's better than a PowerPoint, clearly, because it's real time, it's really fancy, really easy to look at, and it drives action. So it's just a really great use case of how somebody can ultimately come out and create something better than what we've traditionally done with just presenting data in PowerPoint. And I only went a minute over. That was pretty good.